Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Sex shouldn't be this hard. We shouldn't have to work this hard. There must be something wrong with our relationship or our marriage or our sex life if it's this hard. I'm pretty sure you have probably thought one of those thoughts or something along those lines. And in this episode, we are actually going to talk about how all of those thoughts are complete and total lies. Welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, the sex and intimacy podcast for Catholic women. My name is Ellen Holloway, and I'm a Catholic speaker and coach who specializes in sex and marital intimacy. And I am on a mission to help you actually enjoy and desire good, holy sex with your spouse. Joining me today is my super amazing, semi-regular co-host, Kathleen Chavanis.
All right. Who told you that sex should be effortless? Who told you?
Was it one person? Was it many people? Was it an entire society?
Right. Was it Hollywood?
Was it
Hollywood?
It was Hollywood. It was Hollywood. It was Hollywood. Yeah.
Because this is like, it's so common. Just this sentiment of like, it shouldn't be this hard. Sex should just work. It's so common. I mean, I think this is why we see so much divorce as well, is it's just like, oh, like the sexual relationship should just be easy. It should just come. And then when it doesn't, then it's like, oh, well, you're just not compatible. Like I see that in secular books all the time. It's like, oh, well, obviously you're just not compatible. No. Compatibility relies on literally one thing, compatibility for sex. Do you know what the one thing is that I'm going to talk about, Kathleen? The compatibility for sex?
Actually, I don't.
It's the sexual difference. That, like the sexual difference is the only thing that matters for compatibility with sex. Because like you have to be able to have sex, right? So if a man and a woman come together, they are compatible to have sex.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense.
But you need to learn, like that word compatibility. Oh my gosh. Okay, this is not what our podcast episode is about, but I could go on.
But we touched on a hot button.
We did. But it's just like that compatibility, it's not a real thing. Like y'all just need to learn how to have sex together. And you need to put your selfish ego to the side. Yeah. Like learn how to serve each other in sex.
I mean, it's just such a lie that, Satan has sold us so well, because not only is it, a main cause for divorce, or a leading, or one of the, a big cause for divorce, I would say, but it's also the reason we have like cohabitation without marriage, right? It's like, oh yeah, no, we need to like try it out. We need to play house before we really commit to doing it, make sure it works. And then I think some people start doing that and then they realize, well, I mean, do we even have to get married? Like, what's even the point? Like, what's the difference? So,
yeah, I've got some friends like
You're
that.
Exactly right. Yeah. I mean, so do I. Yeah. Friends, family, like,
although they actually are getting married.
Oh, that's good.
Finally. But it's like really they've been cohabitating for like, I don't know, a decade, probably.
Yeah.
And they're now getting married. They're not Catholic.
Yeah.
But
no,
it's just like, yeah, and what happens with cohabitation? Again, this is like not the topic of this podcast, but let's just like dig into this a little bit, and then we'll open up the catechism, get to the topic. One of the biggest issues with cohabitation is that you don't have the sacramental graces of marriage to help you through the difficulties of cohabitation. And the sacramental graces of marriage help you in, and even in just like a natural marriage that's not Catholic and sacramental, there are still graces. That's why, like, two Jewish people who divorce and then become Catholic and want to marry someone, they still have to go through the annulment process, even though they didn't have a Catholic sacramental marriage, right? To like an atheist person who then like became Catholic would have to go through an annulment process, because there are still there's still these sacramental graces that exist even when marriage is cool. Marriage is so cool, guys.
Marriage. Oh my gosh, yeah.
But you know what else is cool? Is the connection of prayer and sex.
We talk about this a lot.
We do.
Because it is.
We really do.
But I mean, yeah, it's like as you really start. So we're going to dive a little bit into the catechism today. And just as Ellen and I were doing it before we pushed record, like, it's just amazing how you read the catechism on prayer and you can just sub prayer with sex. And it's all so pertinent. It just fits, you know.
It's so eye-opening.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it's something that we should challenge ourselves to do. You know, that like when we feel like we're in a dry spell or we feel like our desire is particularly low, if we can start reading reflections or even the catechism on prayer and sub it with sex, like I think it just opens our eyes to the reality of what sex is and how it communicates and what it communicates, you know, when we see it through the lens of prayer. So I don't know, something maybe to try if you're in a little bit of a dry spell or just struggling in general.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's making me want to read. I haven't done this. Like, I haven't like field tested this, but I'm just thinking about Father Jacques Philippe. He's got so many good books on prayer.
Him. I love
and
him.
I now want to read. I have one of his on prayer, like Rediscover the Joy of Prayer or something like that.
I have that too.
I want to read that now in the lens of sex and just like see if it holds to what we're saying. I'm like 98% sure that it absolutely will. And I think it could be a really cool
idea, actually.
Spiritual exercise. You know what? I'm going to make a promise to all you listening. Okay. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go read in light of sex. And if it holds true, I think that we should do like a podcast book club. And we can like go through the book together and talk about it. I think that'd be so fun. Like maybe for Lent.
That'd be really cool.
What's coming up?
Oh my gosh. It's 9 days, right? Isn't it like
it's like 9 days to rediscover the joy of prayer. That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Yeah. I have the exact same one. I don't know if it's on this shelf or not, but yeah, I have the exact same book.
Okay. All right.
That's a great idea. I love
Promise
that idea.
made. Now let's see if I can fulfill it. Okay. But let's dig in just a little bit. For anybody who's like kind of newer and hasn't heard us talking about like this connection of prayer and sex, and you're kind of like, what the heck are you talking about, you crazy ladies?
They sound like heretics.
They sound like heretics. I promise we're not. Right behind me is an icon of the Immaculate Conception. And that right there is prayer and sex. That right there. Okay, so one of the ways that these two things are really connected is that sex is a prayer. Like sex can and should be an opportunity of union with God. And that's one way to define prayer, right? Is like union with God, conversation with God, growing closer to God. And sex is a way to do that. So, right. So sex is prayer. So that's just one way on a super simple level that prayer and sex are similar. But then on a deeper level, sex is basically like an icon of deep, intimate, perfect prayer for us. And what an icon is it's like it's a window into a deeper truth. It helps us in our human nature understand a deeper spiritual truth that we can't comprehend, right? So sex is the like closest, most unified way that two human beings can like come together here on earth. It has, you know, these chemicals spurt off in your brain when you come together. Like there's this physical unity that cannot be achieved in any other way than through intercourse. And then there is this like biological process of creating a child. It's literally the closest that two human beings can get. Prayer is a joining of spirit. When you are praying, you are joining your spirit to God. You're joining your spirit to the Trinity, right? Your spirit, your soul, we can kind of use those interchangeably here. And so like sex being this deep way to connect with another person helps us to understand the deep connection that prayer brings us. So there's kind of like a little Cliff Notes on why it is that we regularly talk about how connected prayer and sex are. And the deeper you get into this, the more you'll see how ridiculously similar they are. And I think it was just in the last episode, or like a couple episodes ago, we were just talking about, like, if you are having trouble getting distracted during sex, go practice praying and work on your distraction during prayer. And that will help you in distraction during sex. So it goes either way, right? Like, sex teaches us about prayer. Prayer can help us be, like, better at sex.
Since you mentioned distraction, can I read our really funny catechism line?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? Let's read the whole thing first. Start with
Okay.
And then we'll end on the hilarious.
Okay, so we'll read the 3 little paragraphs, the 3 little snippets. Okay. So just in, going back to like the whole thing, the title of this podcast, right? We're talking about prayer. Who told you that sex would be effortless, right? Prayer requires effort. Sex requires effort. So the catechism, as it tends to do, sums all of this up perfectly and beautifully in these little succinct paragraphs. So I'm going to read Catechism 2752 to 2754. And 2754 is the real gem, let's be honest. So
it really is. Get ready, guys.
Yeah. Well, and again, as we're reading this, like, just listen to it as prayer, but then sub prayer for sex, and just see how they're so interchangeable. So 2752 says, prayer presupposes an effort, a fight against ourselves and the wiles of the tempter. The battle of prayer is inseparable from the necessary spiritual battle to act habitually according to the Spirit of Christ. We pray as we live because we live as we pray. In the battle of prayer, we must confront erroneous conceptions of prayer, various currents of thought, and our own experience of failure. We must respond with humility, trust, and perseverance to these temptations, which cast doubt on the usefulness or even the possibility of prayer. Like, come on. Okay,
So
but here's
good.
the real kicker. You ready? This is really just hysterical. The principal difficulties in the practice of prayer are distraction and dryness. Like, could they be any more perfectly interchanged? Distraction and dryness.
The principal difficulties
remedy lies
in sex are distraction and dryness.
The one last line. It's just too perfect. The remedy lies in faith, conversion, and vigilance of heart. And lube.
And lube. Okay.
It's like...
Guys, like, God does this. He just gives us these little winks, right? And like, yes, it is 100% true that the principal difficulties in the practice of prayer are distraction and dryness. It is also 100% true that the principal difficulties in the practice of sex are distraction and dryness. And it's funny and it's hilarious. And I love God.
So funny.
So funny. But also, I mean, like,
a great
okay,
sense of humor.
physical dryness, absolutely. Right. But also, I mean, we go through these like dry spells of sex, right?
Yep.
And like dry spells of interest in sex and etc. But like, lube is really important. And the catechism tells us that.
Okay, but let's talk. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, let's go back. Let's go back.
Yeah.
To
Yeah, go back,
2752.
Yep.
Prayer presupposes an effort. Okay? If prayer presupposes an effort, who are we to think that anything else, I mean, I'm not even talking about sex right now, anything else, like, should come effortless. Who are we to think that? If prayer, which is like what we are made for, like God, like made us to love and serve him. That is prayer, right? Loving and serving God is prayer. If that is like needs effort, then why would anything else just come without effort? And most especially sex, in which two human souls are being, unified in a deep, intimate way. And like, when we're praying, like just imagine when we do the Stations of the Cross, like what's the point of doing the Stations of the Cross? Is it just to think about some bad things that happen? No, it is to unite ourselves to Christ's passion, to unite our suffering to his, to walk through his passion and unite our lives to that and sacrifice for his passion, like give of ourselves for his passion and thank him for his passion, right? The point is not just to like enjoy reading a story, because the passion's not enjoyable to read, right? And I'm not saying that sex shouldn't be enjoyable. But like it has to include effort. And when we're just lying to ourselves when we say things just like, oh, this should just be easier. It should be, this should just happen. My husband should just know what to do. My husband should just know how to initiate. I shouldn't even have to like practice initiating. I shouldn't have to, I should just get an orgasm with no effort, right? Like those are all lies, and they are all lies from the devil, because he's trying to screw up your sex life. He's trying to screw up your life. He's trying to make it so that you and your husband never have sex. Because gosh, that'd be the worst thing in the devil's mind if you and your husband had sex. It would. Because there's the possibility of new life being created. And he hates that so much. And yeah, again, one of the worst things that the devil, like in the devil's mind, is that you pray. He hates that, right? So he's going to distract you. He's going to cause dryness, physical or mental. No.
All kinds of dryness.
All kinds of dryness, right? Like, it just, sex is an effort, and sex is hard. And we should actually rejoice in the fact that it is an effort, and it doesn't come easily, and it doesn't just happen. Like, we should rejoice in that fact. And then work hard for it.
And I think that, something I know that we've struggled with, and I don't think we're unique to, I think a lot of people struggle with, especially as you're married for, longer periods of time, you have kids, right? Like you become parents, and now you can't just have sex all the time or whenever you want, because now you've got children around, and it's like, just as life gets busy and you get tired and all these things, it becomes less spontaneous, right? And we talk about this a lot too. We talk about spontaneity, and we talk about planning, and we talk about but I think that so many of us have bought into this lie that, well, if it's not spontaneous, where like he gets home from work and she just wants to like rip his clothes off right away, you know what I mean, then it's just like there's something wrong, then there's a lack of attraction.
Or somehow it's like less good if it's not spontaneous. Like somehow it's lesser.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's such a lie.
We'll be back with the episode in just a minute. Have you ever had the experience of learning something or hearing something really interesting or awesome on this podcast, and then trying to go explain it to your husband, but it just does not come across correctly, or somehow the conversation just turns into an argument when all you wanted to do was share something that you learned? Look, talking about sex is really hard. I struggled with it for so much of my marriage before I started learning the tools and the specific types of conversations that my husband and I needed to have in order to make our sex life incredible. And so I put all of these tools and these frameworks for conversations into one super easy to digest course called Let's Talk About It. I want you to have these tools. I want you to have an amazing sex life, and having conversations about sex and actually talking about these things is what is going to get you there. Check out the link in the show notes for Let's Talk About It, or go to vinesinfullbloom.com/let's talk.
It's such a lie, because if you think about it, like, what does it say about our prayer life when we only pray when we are like so filled with this desire to, right? Like, if we're only praying when we have that passionate desire to go to God and to pray, that's not true love. That's just being a whim. That's just going off of how we're feeling, right? Rather than choosing, in spite of the fact that we feel like, I don't really feel like sitting down to pray right now. Mm-hmm. I've got too much to do, right? Like, when we have those thoughts of like, this is going to take too much time, I don't have the time, I don't have the mental capacity right now, like, I'm just going to move on, right? But then we stop ourselves and say, no, I need, like, God is my all. I have to go and pray, right? Nothing is more important than this time with my God. Mm-hmm. And we do it in spite of those things. Like, that's real love.
Yeah.
Right. And again, let's look at sex the same way, that it's like, dude, we've got way too much to do. We don't have enough time. I can't, I'm too stressed out. Right.
I didn't sleep last night.
But then we see our spouse. I didn't sleep last night. I'm too tired. Right. Like, all of these things. And listen, these things happen. And sometimes, yeah, you just need to go to sleep. I'm not saying this is like
right. We're not
time.
saying you always, yeah.
But, right. Right. But at the same time, like, being able to say, you know what? We need this. I don't feel connected because life is very busy and we're not making the time. I'm going to put all that aside and I'm going to make the time because I love you. And that's what you do. When you love someone, you prioritize them.
Yes.
Right? So it's, and maybe it's not super spontaneous. Maybe it takes you having to say, yeah, you know what? I'm a little bit stressed, but let's give this a go anyway. Like, I want to do this anyway. And I want to challenge the spouse that is on the receiving end of that to not take that personally.
Yes.
As, you know, like oh, well, she doesn't want to rip my clothes off and so she's not attracted to me. Take it instead. You need to reframe perspective and just take it as, wow, she's dropping everything to prioritize me. And I'm grateful for that, right? Like, again, this is something that personally we have struggled with, you know, and I think it's a lie for one spouse to think that because they're intentionally prioritizing, to the point that to them it might seem like work, right? Like, I don't want sex to feel like work. I just want it to be fun, and I want it to be full of passion, and I want it to be full of desire. That's great. And that phase will come. Like, that time will come.
Yeah.
And it will come and it will go. But in the meantime, when life is chaotic and busy, praise God that they are stopping to choose you. They're intentionally putting everything aside to choose. That is love in action. That's real, true love in action. So I think,
well, and like, let's talk about some of the saints that, like Mother Teresa, God, you know, pulled away from her. He pulled that feeling, that lovely feeling of unity with God. He pulled that away from her to bring her closer to him, because her daily effort to pray, to be there in adoration when she didn't have the feeling of the love of God. She knew it was there, but she didn't have the feeling.
Yeah.
That got her to heaven. guys. The effort.
Yeah.
I mean, God brought her to heaven, right? It wasn't her effort, right? But like the effort that these saints, we have so many stories of saints where they've been through a dark night of some sort. And maybe it was like basically their whole life, like Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
And her effort in prayer, her continual effort that wasn't based on any lovey-dovey feelings, that brought God so much joy. It brought Jesus on the cross so much consolation. And and that's hard in our human nature because we want to just like, we want the other person to we want everybody to love us. That's just being human. We want everyone to love us.
Yeah.
And we especially want our spouse to just love us no matter what. Just love us, right? But it's so hard. I'm not saying that this is an easy thing, but like what Kathleen said about reframing this effort that one spouse puts towards sex when there isn't that lovey-dovey feeling, that's it right there. I mean, that's consoling Christ on the cross, and it's loving your spouse. I mean, it's both because they're like the same.
Yeah, and Satan wants you to think that it means something bad. You know, Satan wants you to think that it's like, oh, you're not attractive. This is work for her. There's no passion in this, right? Like he wants you to think that. But instead, like it's the opposite. It's just so maybe it's not like, maybe it's going to take a little extra work for her, but she's choosing, or he, whatever it might be, right? Like they are choosing to take on that work, to do that work for the good of the couple, right? For the good of their spouse, for the good of themselves, knowing that even though it might take work, that ultimately they are receiving grace from this too. You are receiving grace you're as a couple, right? Yes. So we have to, I was just talking to my husband about this. Like you have to be on guard. I'm just seeing it left and right. I'm seeing it everywhere. And I know we talk about this a lot too, and we go down this rabbit hole, and sometimes it may sound too negative, but like, guys, Satan is after every good and holy marriage, every single one. And I was just talking to my husband the other day about how we need to be on guard for like things that seem like nothing, that might seem like, I don't know, like it's so easy when you're talking about sort of like your sexual life and everything to just take things out of a spiritual context. But we need to be on guard for every little thought and moment that we feel the devil could use against us, because he has been using them. Like he wants so much for us to misunderstand each other, for us to disconnect. Like, and he is working overtime in my marriage anyway to try and get us to that point. And it is like, I'm telling you, it feels like a battle, because it is.
It is. And it's literally like, why isn't it
so easy? It's actually a battle. Like, it's not just an analogy. It is real. Yeah. Right? It feels so hard. Like, this should be so easy. This should be so effortless. Why isn't it? Because it's literally a battle.
Yeah, because it's literally not supposed to be
a battle.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be effortless. Yeah. Like, and that's the whole point of this podcast episode.
Yeah.
Before we close out, let's circle back to the Catechism 2753 and just dig into this just a little bit, because I think there's just some more beautiful insight. And I think I really want to encourage anybody to just like open up the Catechism. And if you don't have a copy of the Catechism, just go download the Ascension app, because the whole Catechism is there. And just go and like, just bring these to prayer time. Just spend like 15 minutes in prayer. I mean, spend an hour if you have it. If you don't have an hour, spend an hour. That's even better.
Yeah, exactly.
But just 2752, 2753, 2754. I mean, even just like keep going. It's just it's all beautiful. But so 2753, In the battle of prayer, we must confront erroneous conceptions of prayer, various currents of thought, and our own experience of failure. And this sentence rings so true for sex in so many lights, right? In the battle of sex, in the battle of marriage and family, right? Like we could even zoom out a little bit. We must confront erroneous conceptions of sex. Like that is Hollywood. Erroneous conceptions of sex.
Yeah.
That's what our culture thinks sex is, right? Like there's so many erroneous conceptions of sex. And we need to like bring those to God and say, hey, is this a truth about sex? I mean, there's one thing that we're talking about in this podcast episode is like effortless, right? And we're
Right.
showing you that this is a total falsehood, that sex should be effortless. But there's like a million more erroneous conceptions of sex that we're all holding in our head. I've got a bunch of them, I'm sure. I know I do. And like God can help us untwist those lies. Okay. In the battle of prayer, we must confront various currents of thought. Now, I can see this in two ways, various currents of thought, right? One is like distraction, right? And there's go look in the archives of like episodes. We have got episodes on distraction.
Yeah.
But then also let's look at that phrase in a different light, various currents of thought, like the current of cultural thought and how that's affecting sex and our view of sex. So we need to confront that. And
even
then
purity culture, right?
Yes.
So much of purity culture gives us these currents of thought, right? Like sex isn't holy. This isn't like good, right? Like what that make us struggle with even entering in. Yeah. So sorry, keep going though.
No, it's so good. Oh my gosh. And then the last one in this one sentence that is just gold. Our own experience of failure. We've all failed with sex. We've all failed with sex, right? Maybe you failed in like a sinful way of doing something that you shouldn't have done or having sex before marriage. Like that's one area of failure. But like maybe you failed in experiencing sexual pleasure. Maybe you failed in being in the moment. Maybe you've failed. There's like, if you start thinking about it, your brain loves to tell you about your failures. Okay. So if you start thinking about it, you're just going to go, you're going to have a laundry list of the ways that you've failed with sex.
Yeah.
And we have to confront that failure and say, look, like that failure does not define me. It does not define my sexual relationship. If there is sin, head to confession. God will take that all away, right? But if there's failure in a way that's like not sin, right? Still bring it to God and ask him to like take it away so that you're not like on this, I don't know, like a hamster wheel of like negative thoughts about all the ways that you fail with sex, and I'm not good enough, and I'm not good at this, and I can't initiate, and I can't experience sexual pleasure, and like all of these things. Like, let God take those, like bring them to prayer with God, and let him confront those with you. And that's going to look different for everybody. I don't really have a clear picture of like what confronting those failures looks like. But God really, truly wants your union to be as holy as the moment of the Immaculate Conception. He wants every single one of your unions to be that holy. I've been spending a lot of time just like reflecting on the Immaculate Conception lately, like since this most recent feast of the Immaculate Conception. I've just been like,
hence the icon.
Hence the new icon that I have. Like, oh, there's so much mystery in the Immaculate Conception. And there's so much like good and beauty in it, and just this mystery. I mean, it's just mystery. That's the best word to explain it. But I really, truly believe that God wants every single union to be that holy. And if it was, I mean, oh my gosh, the world would change.
Yeah.
And it would be amazing. Right? Like,
yeah. Yeah.
And it can be, right? Like, there's so much power in our marriages. There's so much power in sex over the devil and over the evil one. Yeah. And it's so cool. I'm getting a little mystical over here.
I think that, I know, you are. But I love that. I think that, in particular, when we're talking about our failures, we tend to focus so much on the physical, right? Like the actual failure itself. We tend to focus on past trauma, right? And we just feel like without, like those things are just unchangeable. Like they're too much to overcome. And we forget that there is a spiritual component to sex, right? And it's like, and that we have a heart that was formed by a God who is so invested in our sex life, right? Like sex is the means by which God has chosen to bring his children into the world.
Yeah.
He has a major investment in that, right? And so, and I think that we focus so much on like, well, I need to go to therapy and I need to get this worked on. And that's, I'm going to fix my problems by going to therapy and like, listen, therapy is great and has a lot of like, there's a lot of goodness to it. And I'm not saying don't go, that's not your problem. Like for a lot of people it is, but we forget to go to God and ask him to doctor our hearts. Right? Like we forget to ask it, like you formed me, you created me, and this heart has been wounded and only you can heal it. Right? So like and asking him to go in and to reshape it. I will say that in our struggles that we've had over the last several years, I am finding the most, and I like praise God for it because it's almost amazing how far I have come personally just by going to God and asking him to reshape my heart.
Yes.
Because therapy can get you so far and it can get you very far. But ultimately you have a heart that was created by a father who loves you and he alone can tend it. So
can I give an image just to like close this episode out on that?
Yeah.
So just think about Play-Doh and God made your heart with Play-Doh.
Not the philosopher.
No. Like Play-Doh. Like
the toy.
The toy. Yes, I'm not talking about Play-Doh. Although we could get into that in another episode. Play-Doh. Okay. God made your heart with Play-Doh. Okay. God has all this amazing Play-Doh. He made the world with Play-Doh. The devil doesn't have any Play-Doh. He doesn't have anything to make. The only thing he can do is be that little like 18-month-old kid who just like smashes your Play-Doh creation. And so the devil is walking around with his fists like a little, you can just imagine the little 18-month-old kid, right? Or the 3-year-old boy, right? Mm-hmm. And he's just squishing. He's squishing your heart and he's squishing the beautiful things that God has made out of Play-Doh. And God has the ability to take that smashed Play-Doh and put it back the way that he originally made it. He can reform that beautiful heart that he made of yours. And then the devil's going to come back. He's going to come back. And he's going to smash it again, right? But like if we just continue to bring that to God and say, reform my heart, heal my mind, heal these things that happen. And God works through the other people in our world, right? So like what Kathleen was saying about therapy, we're not saying that therapy is wrong, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Like God works through amazing therapists. Yeah. But like God is the one who's going to remold your heart. And so we cannot sever healing from God. Like we have to go into healing with God and ask him to bring that healing.
But you have to ask, which takes effort. So
right. Because he's not just going to do it. He's not going to do it without your permission. Because he's a loving God. He's not going to take.
Yeah.
He's only going to come in when you ask him.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you listen to podcasts on a platform that gives you the option to rate or review, we'd love for you to do that because it helps us spread the word about the podcast. If you ever have questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, please reach out to us. We love to hear from you. You can reach out on Instagram or send us an email. Our email is in the show notes. Until next time.